Right now, somewhere in the eastern Pacific, a lone survivor is floating in the dark after a U.S. strike turned his boat into burning splinters. 2 others on that boat are already dead. The U.S. military says they were drug traffickers and unlawful combatants.
No judge signed off, no courtroom, just a secret Justice Department opinion and a green light to fire.
This is one more hit in Operation Southern Spear, a campaign that has quietly killed at least 121 people at sea with almost no public proof and almost no oversight. If America can kill anonymous suspects on tiny boats thousands of miles away based on laws you're not allowed to read, what else can be done in your name without you ever knowing?
The justification offered is simple on paper. These boats allegedly carry drugs and work for designated terrorist groups. In that framing, every strike is both a counter-narcotics mission and part of a wider war on terror, bundled into a single blast of force. But the evidence offered to the public is anything but simple. Officials have provided almost no specific proof that each vessel hit actually had narcotics on board, or that every person killed was really tied to a cartel or a terrorist group. Instead, the administration leans on a secret Justice Department opinion classified, unseen that it says allows lethal action without judicial review. It is a legal black box that converts anonymous men on a boat into unlawful combatants with the stroke of a pen. In conventional war, the laws of armed conflict require clear combatant status, proportionality, and distinction between fighters and civilians. On a dark patch of ocean with no uniforms and no flags, those lines are harder to see and far easier to ignore. Military lawyers interviewed by CNN have already raised red flags. Some say the September 2nd follow-up strike, which killed survivors from an earlier blast, looks especially hard to square with international law. Wounded survivors are supposed to be protected, not retargeted. Yet the operation continues, its body count rising. 121 people dead so far, according to public reporting. That's not a glitch. That's a pattern. A pattern that is only now beginning to draw serious pushback from Congress. Lawmakers across both parties are asking basic questions. Who exactly is being killed? What intelligence is this based on? What happens if you hit a boat of low-level couriers or worse, mistake fishermen for traffickers in the fog of war at sea? For now, most of the faces in this story are invisible. We don't know the names of the 2 killed on Monday's boat, or the name of the 1 survivor still out there in the water. We only know how the U.S. has labeled them, not as suspects, not as defendants, but as unlawful combatants. In the language of law, that label matters. It's meant to signal that these people aren't ordinary criminals, but fighters outside the bounds of civilian protection. In practice, it has become a kind of magic word that moves people from the courtroom to the crosshairs. The administration argues that in a world of transnational criminal networks, the old boundaries between war and law enforcement no longer work. They want tools that can hit hard, fast and far from home, without the delays of extradition and trials. But human rights advocates warn that once you accept remote strikes on anonymous boats as normal, it becomes harder to draw any line at all. If the evidence stays secret, and the legal reasoning stays classified, how can anyone outside the operation know where justice ends and abuse begins? There's also a basic practical question. Do these killings actually reduce the flow of narcotics? So far, the government has released no clear data showing that Operation Southern Spear has significantly dented the drug trade that continues to flood North America. For cartels and trafficking networks, boats are often expendable. For the people on board, smugglers, coerced couriers, or desperate migrants, they are everything. A single missile can erase a life that was already at the margins of the world's concern. The survivor in this latest strike, whoever they are, is now the lone living witness to what really happened on that vessel. But as search and rescue operations play out under a foreign flag, it is not clear if their voice will ever be heard in an American courtroom or a public hearing. Instead, the official story will likely remain what it is right now: a brief military press release, a classified legal underpinning, and a growing list of dead whose stories end somewhere out past the shipping lanes. Supporters of strong drug enforcement say this is the price of taking the fight to traffickers before their cargo reaches American streets. To them, every destroyed boat is a blow against poison headed for U.S. communities. But critics counter that America has been declaring war on drugs for half a century, with little to show for it except mass incarceration at home and militarized operations abroad. Now they say that same failed mindset has moved offshore into a legal gray zone with missiles attached. Operation Southern Spear doesn't happen in front of cameras. There's no body cam footage, no jury selection, no public cross-examination of witnesses. Just a decision, a launch, a detonation, and a brief line in a press release about neutralizing a threat. That's part of what makes it so hard for the public to grapple with. It's violence that feels distant, silent, and strangely clean. There are no crime scene photos, no grieving families on camera, just numbers and euphemisms. Yet for the families of those on board, there is nothing clean about it. Somewhere in South or Central America, relatives are waiting for calls that will never come, or rumors that their sons were blown apart by a country they've never seen. They may never know exactly how their loved ones died, only that they left on a boat and did not return. Officially, they'll be remembered, if they are remembered at all, as numbers in a counter-narcotics campaign, not as people with names and stories. Back in Washington, the fight over Southern Spear is now opening a fault line between branches of government. Congress wants answers. The executive branch insists it has all the authority it needs. The courts, so far, have barely touched the question. Some lawmakers frame this as a basic separation of powers issue. If a president can secretly declare people unlawful combatants on the high seas based on classified memos, they argue, then traditional checks and balances start to erode. Others worry about precedent. What happens when another country cites Operation Southern Spear to justify its own lethal strikes against alleged criminals, without trials beyond its borders? Can the U.S. object if it's already normalized that behavior itself? For now, the administration defends the campaign as targeted, precise, and legally sound. Its critics say those words ring hollow when the law behind them is locked away and the targets can't answer back. Somewhere between those positions lies the truth and the risk. The survivor in Monday's strike, if found alive, could be a crucial test case. Their testimony could illuminate what actually happens on these boats, how they were approached, and whether any warning was given before the sky opened up. But it's entirely possible their story will never reach the American public. They might be questioned quietly, handed to another government, or disappear into a system with no cameras and no transcripts. In that silence, the official narrative will stand unchallenged. This is what happens when lethal force moves into the shadows of classification and distance. It becomes something the public hears about only in passing, a background hum of operations rather than a front-page debate over life, death, and legality. But make no mistake, the stakes are enormous. They touch on the meaning of due process, the limits of executive power, and the definition of who counts as a combatant in a world where crime and war increasingly blur. For service members tasked with carrying out these strikes, the moral weight is real too. They are told they are stopping drugs and fighting terror. They are also the ones who have to live with the knowledge that a button they pressed ended lives they never saw up close. Some military lawyers and officers are already voicing concern quietly, anonymously, often after leaving active duty. That should be a warning sign. When the people trained to follow orders start questioning whether those orders are legal, something deeper is wrong. The history of the war on drugs is full of policies that felt tough and decisive in the moment, only to be judged harshly years later for their cost in lives, freedoms, and trust. Southern Spear may end up as one more entry in that long, troubled ledger. For now, the boats keep moving, the missions keep launching, and the deaths keep adding up, mostly out of sight, out of mind, for people far from those waters. The ocean is vast and it hides many things. Among them, perhaps, are mistakes we haven't even recognized yet. The two who died on Monday will likely never be named in official press releases. The one who survived may never be interviewed on American television. But their fates are now part of a story that directly involves use power, use law, and use responsibility. As citizens, we are being asked to accept that story on faith, that the government knows what it is doing, that the targets deserve their fate, that the classified memos are sound. The question is whether that faith has truly been earned. In a democracy, oversight is supposed to be the answer to that doubt. Congress, the courts, and a free press all exist to make sure lethal power is used within clear, lawful limits the public can understand. Operation Southern Spear is now a test of whether those guardrails still work when the targets are poor, foreign, and far from any camera. If the system won't scrutinize their deaths, some ask, whose deaths will it scrutinize? The answer will shape not just U.S. drug policy, but the broader question of how much violence Americans are willing to accept in their name, so long as it happens over the horizon. For people living along the coasts of Latin America, the war on drugs has never been abstract. It's narco-violence on land, corruption in politics, and now missiles from the sky. Southern Spear is only the latest expression of a conflict they feel in their bones. When those missiles fall, the message from Washington is that this is about keeping Americans safe from narcotics. The question we have to ask is whether we are also making others less safe in ways that may never show up on a drug seizure chart. Out on the Eastern Pacific tonight, the waves have already closed over the wreckage of one more boat. But the ripples from that explosion are still moving outward toward Ecuador's rescue crews, toward grieving families, and back toward the halls of American power. Southern Spear, for now, is still largely in the shadows. The more we learn, the more it forces us to confront a hard truth. In the name of fighting drugs, the United States is running a killing campaign at sea that most of its own citizens barely know exists. Whether you see that as necessary, reckless, or something in between will depend on how you weigh threat, law, and human life. But whatever your view, it shouldn't be based on secrecy and slogans alone. It should be based on facts and on voices that are too often missing. Tonight, 2 more people are gone. 1 more person is fighting for survival, and a quiet part of American foreign policy has become just a little bit harder to ignore. The question is whether we will look away again or demand to really see. As new details emerge about this strike and others like it, we'll now keep following the trail from the classified memos in Washington to the broken boats in the Eastern Pacific to help you understand what is being done in your name. Because when missiles are falling on small boats far from any battlefield, questions aren't unpatriotic. They're necessary. And in a free country, they shouldn't be classified.
This is U.S. Media Power, bringing you the story behind the headlines, also visual. If you want deeper coverage of America's hidden wars, its drug policies, and the lives caught between them, stay with us, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.